about the different risks that you would be taking, and we said that as you take additional risk, you want additional reward. So what I'm going to do is have you do a discussion board where I'm saying that I want you to either find an article about risk and return as it pertains to investing, or you could even interview someone regarding that topic. And then I'm kind of basically going through all this and explaining it. But if the article is online, I'm saying please provide a link to that article. If you interview someone, you don't need to state their name, just the relationship to them, such as a mentor, a friend, or a family member, so you don't have to expose who they are. I'm saying I want you to write 1 or 2 paragraphs about something that you learned in the article or that you found in the interview that you conducted that might apply to you and others as they are investing, and so that means as it's pertaining to the risk and return. I'm then telling you to please remember other students will be able to read your comments, and so I don't want you to reveal any personal information that you would not want others to know, and that's going to be true with everyone at the discussion board. They will be that other students can read that. I'm saying you must use proper grammar for full credit, so don't do any text lingo, don't try to do any abbreviations, make sure it makes sense, proper sentencing, otherwise I'm not going to give you full credit. And again, the discussion board is open now until February 25th at 11:59 p.m. So as you're going through that, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, don't hesitate to email me or ask me during class or something and let me know. Are there any questions as it stands right now? Again, these are 10 points. And like I told you, I always give you 2 weekends, knowing that you guys are busy and have other things going on. I didn't want to introduce it and we still have the exam kind of looming over your head because I felt like I threw a lot at you last week with the exam and the written assignment. So that's why I waited until today to open up the discussion board. So hopefully that gives you some time to kind of think it through and then start applying those concepts. Questions or concerns? Before we start chapter 4 then, are there any questions on the written assignment that you guys want to go over today? I told you we'd always have class time for that. Okay, so the assignment is, and I don't even know if I have a copy of it with me today. Yeah, I do. So if you read the assignment for the written assignment, oh, I gave it to somebody, and I didn't pull another one. It says that it's the 2014 annual report, but if you look at the year that the 2014 annual report ends, it's a 2015 day. So when you go to those columns on those annual reports, you're using the far left column, and it has a 2015 year-end date. So I think for one of them, it was like January 31st, if I remember right, and the other one is like a February 1st or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, mine says January 30th.
Of 2015?
Yes.
That's the column you use. Because remember I told you that sometimes what happens is they don't have a calendar year and they have a the third column. When you do that, it's going to say PY. You want that PY to be a 1. If it's 12, that's usually how they come out of the factory. Hit the number 1 if it's not a 1. And then if you look up at the top, there's an enter button. Hit the enter button. And the down arrow button. And then it'll say CY. You want the CY to be a 1. Hit enter and down arrow. And then hit your second button again. And hit your CPT button, which is basically your quit button. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell your calculator that we want 1 payment per year and we want 1 compounding per year. That's what we're doing, to let you know. So as we get started with these basic functions, we just want 1 payment per year and 1 compounding per year. And actually, I would recommend that you always leave your calculator set like that. You'll have fewer mistakes if you just leave your calculator set like that. The other thing that I would recommend that you do is hit the second button and then look very down at the bottom under the number 2. There's a dot. So hit second dot and it says DEC. That's asking you how many decimals you want displayed on your calculator. I always make mine be a 4. So hit 4, enter, and then second CPT again, which has quit above it. So that's how you quit your second mode. CPT means compute, but it's also the quit button. So does everybody have their calculator so that we're all kind of on the same page so when we do our calculations they'll turn out right? Okay. Let's look at the timeline then. What we're using today is the third row of keys that are all gray. The third row of keys that are all gray. And then once we get into chapter 5, we'll introduce more keys. We're keeping it pretty basic, pretty simple today. So when we look at our timeline, remember I told you that on the left-hand side, I write t equals 0, so that's today, time period 0. So today, time period 0 is the same as PV, or present value, on your calculator. So if we tell you that there's a lump sum at time period 0 that somebody's investing, or there's a lump sum cash flow at time period 0, that's going to correspond with your PV, your present value button. Then if we tell you that there's a lump sum that happens in the future, that's your FV, your future value. FV, future value. A lump sum at some point in the future. Then what will happen on the timeline, you guys are used to seeing this, I'll put the numbers up here on the timeline that are representing how many periods we have involved in our calculations. And notice I'm saying periods, not years, because this 1 might not represent a whole year. Because maybe we're going to have cash flows that happen monthly, like if you go get a car loan, you're going to make the payments every month. So we're talking about the number of periods then, and so that's going to coordinate with the N on your calculator. The N on your calculator is the number of periods involved. And like I said, if you'll leave your CY and PY set at 1, that's how I'll present the problems. The next thing that we see then, or want to talk about, is the PMT key. That's your payment key. PMT is your payment key. In order to use the payment evenly spaced, it's the same dollar amount, you can use your payment key. If you decided you were gonna do something and you were gonna make a payment this month and for $100, and then in 3 months for $200, that type of an example, you couldn't use your payment key. I'll teach you how to take care of that later. So if you're gonna use the payment key, the dollar amount has to be the same every single time, and the payments have to be evenly spaced. And then finally, the IY button. That's a percentage. A percentage per period. The percentage per period. So those are going to be the 5 keys that we're going to learn today and how to use them. Again, it'll be pretty basic, and we'll go through it just so that you guys can have some time with your calculator. I'll do the examples in the book and let you guys basically be using your calculator so that you can come back and practice again. So on page 120, let's just kind of go through the first one together because he's still talking about organizing the cash flows. But in this one, what he's saying is, okay, let's look at how the cash flows are organized, and he's actually having me set it up. So let's use his numbers and actually set it up and do a calculation. So he's saying, let's pretend like, let me erase this. When it gets down to 4.2, he's doing future value, and he's saying, let's pretend like you walk into the bank and you put $100 in the bank. And let's pretend like you want to leave the money in the bank for 1 year, and the bank is telling you that you would earn 5%, and then the question is, what would you have sitting in the bank in 1 year? So, I mean, it's basic. I know you could probably do it in your head, but it's just trying to help you understand how your calculator thinks. So with our calculator, what's going to happen is out of these 5 variables, okay, these 5 gray keys on your BA2+, if you can define 4 of them, you can calculate the 5th one. So let's look at what they've defined for us. They've defined the $100 present value. We're walking into the bank and we're putting $100 in the bank. So put in 100 and hit your PV button. So 100 PV. They say we're going to leave the money in the bank for 1 year, so hit the 1N. 1N. We're going to earn 5%, so put in the whole number 5 and hit IY. So we know present value, we know N, and we know IY. Okay, so that's 3 variables. I said you have to know 4 variables to calculate the 5th. We know we're going to calculate future value because we're wondering at the end of the year, what's the lump sum then that's going to be sitting in our account? Well, so in this one, what's going to happen is payment is 0. So 0 payment. We're going to walk in, put the money in the bank, and we're not showing up for a year. We're not making payments along the way. So sometimes when you read a problem, it could be that that 4th variable that you're searching for is a 0. In this case, it is. So you get all of that in, and it doesn't matter what order you put it in. You just have to get those 4 variables in, so if you mess up something, you don't have to start all over. Then you want it to compute CPT, future value. So hit the CPT button and hit future value. And what you'll get for your answer is 105. And it's a negative. I'll explain that here in a minute. It's a negative 105. I'll explain that in a minute. So just make sure you're getting the 105. Everybody get 105? Okay, let me explain the negative first. If you look on page 120, they're talking about cash inflows and cash outflows. So what they're saying is that you have to have cash going in and then coming back out, or you never have a return. Think about it, if you went out and you bought stock today, that would be a cash outflow. If you never got cash flowing back to you, you don't have a return. So your calculator has to see money going both ways. So you saw that 100 as a positive going into that account, so it's going to pretend like that 105 is a negative coming back out. Whether you pull it out or not, it would have to pretend like it's coming back to you. So what you're seeing then, and not to insult your intelligence, but you're saying $100 return of your investment, the $100 you put in, and the $5 return on your investment, the 5% that the bank put in. Does that make sense? Questions or comments so far? Okay, let's look then on page 122, compounding interest. So what they're saying is, okay, same scenario, you walk into the bank and you put $100 in, and now what's going to happen is, we're going to earn 5% for 2 years. So we earn 5% the first year, we earn 5% the second year. Now we're wondering what's going to be in our account, what's the future value at the end of the second year. So if you think about it, not a whole lot is changing. It's still 100 present value, and here's the nice thing about these calculators. They remember what you just put in. So you don't have to clear it out and start all over again. Okay, so that's the good thing. But it's also a bad thing because it's going to remember what you put in it. So a week later, it remembers even if you don't. So if you have something like, for example, a payment of a 0, I would force that because you don't know. Maybe there's a payment sitting in there and you forgot about it. But for this one, think about it. We already have payment of 0 in there, so we don't have to re-input that. We also have present value of 100. We don't have to input that. We already have the IY of 5. We really don't have to input that again if we haven't cleared out our calculators. The only thing that's changing is now we've got 2 in. We've got 2 periods that we're leaving that $100 in the bank. 2 years. We show up, and how much is in there? It should come up $110.25. $110.25. Here's why. And here's what they're telling you about the compounding interest. Remember back when we just left it in for a year, and there was $105, $100 was our investment, and $5 was what the bank put in, the 5%. So now what's happening is 2 years later, $100 is the return of our money, and then we had the $5 return on our money year 1, but then year 2, we get $5.25 return on our money, because what's happening is we get the $5 on what we put in, but we're also getting 25 cents more because they're paying 5% on the $5 they put in. So that's compound interest. So they're not just paying interest on the original $100. What's happening is during the second year that you've got your money in the bank, they're paying interest on the 105. So that's why you're getting $5.25 of interest. So that's why they'll talk about compound interest and how it can be in your favor, because you're not only getting interest on the money you put in, but you're also getting interest on the money that the bank put in. Everybody still okay with your calculator? Let's look at page 125 then. What they're throwing at you there is what happens if in year 1 you make 5%, But in year 2, you make 6%. So what's gonna happen is you're gonna have to treat that like 2 separate problems. So we already have calculated the problem where we walk into the bank, we have $100 we put in at time period 0, payment of 0, 5% for 1 year. We've already calculated that as a future value of 105. Okay, so nothing changed there. What's changing now is that in year 2, the second year we invest, we have 6% for our IY. So 6%, change your IY, 6% IY. And we're going to earn that for 1 period, because between year 1, the end of year 1 and the end of year 2, so 1 period of earning 6%. But look at this. What happens is the future value that we originally calculated is now going to become a present value, because we're going to pretend like at the end of year 1, we have $105 sitting in our account, and we're going to invest that for a year. So it's like we're doing 2 separate problems. We did the first one to look at year 1. We're doing the second problem to look at year 2. So it's like we're starting all over again. It's like we've moved down the timeline, and now we're standing at time period 1, investing the money for a year. So I'm investing 105 at 6% for 1 year. Again, my payment is 0. CPT, my future value. And you should get $111.30. Everybody get that? Present value 105, 1N, 6IY, 0 payment, CPT, future value. So once again, we've got our $100, the return of our original investment. We've got the $5 return on our investment year 1. But now what's happening is we're getting 6% year 2. So that's how we're getting the $6.30 on our investment year 2, because it's $6 because we're getting 6% on the $100 we put in, but we're also getting 6% on the $5 that the bank put in. So that's how it's being broken down. And again, I know this is very simple, I know this is very basic, but what they're trying to get you guys to understand is how your calculator is working and how it's thinking, so that once we get to harder problems, it makes sense. Because if you understand the basics of how your calculator thinks, you can calculate anything. Questions or comments so far? So we've established that compound interest, so compounding is moving from the left to the right of the timeline. Compounding. On page 128, they introduce the concept of discounting. Discounting is moving from the right to the left of the timeline. Discounting cash flows. Because the premises of the time value of money is that if I have $1 today, it's worth more to me than $1 that I receive in the future, because I can invest it and I can get a return on it. So that's why we're saying if we're looking at cash flows on the right-hand side of the timeline and bringing them back to the left-hand side, we're saying we're discounting them because we're bringing them back to today's dollars. So that's what the term discounting means. So in the first one that he has you do, and again, I'm just going to stick with his examples at the bottom of page 128. He's saying, let's pretend like you have a future value that you need, and he's saying, let's pretend like that's $100. So you need a lump sum of $100 in the future. So 100, get your future value. He's saying you need that in 5 years, so 5N. pretend like you can earn 5% per year. So 5 IY. Now, you'll notice that the author on the bottom of page 128, he puts 5% in every single year. He puts that little 5%. What I do is I put 5% here between time period 0 and 1, and you'll see that then on the homework. And if your interest rate doesn't change, I don't go and put it between every one. So if you just see me park the 5% between 0 and 1, that means it's not changing. If there's any change, I'll document it. So this is the way I show you 5%. So 5 IY for 5 years, 5N. And he's asking you, okay, compute out the present value. Well, remember we needed to define 4 variables and calculate the fifth. Okay, so we've got IY of 5, we've got N of 5, and future value of 100. And once again, this time our payment is going to be 0. So don't be afraid to have one of the variables be 0, because we're saying if I need 5 years, if I need $100 5 years from now and I can earn 5%, how much do I need to invest today? Time period 0. So I'm going to go put some money in the bank today, time period 0, and walk away and not show back up for 5 years. So how much money do I need to come up with then today so that that can happen? Do the calculation, you should get $78.35. $78.35. Everybody able to get that? Questions or comments? Okay, let me shut off the recording because it's been going for quite a while and the file gets too big for me to post it otherwise. And let me start again. Okay, let's look then at the bottom of page 129. They have kind of a real world application that they want to put to this. So they're saying in that LG 4-4 box, the example 4-3, page 129, they're setting up an equation where they're saying that you've got a scenario where they're pretending like you walk into a furniture store. And I'm sure you guys have all heard ads where they advertise that you can walk in somewhere and buy something with 0 money down or $1 down or something like that. So they're saying, let's pretend like you walk into a furniture store, and what they're telling you is that you can finance the furniture for 2 years. And they're telling you that what you're financing, or what they're wanting you to do then, is come up with $1,000 at the end of 2 years. Okay, this isn't the normal way they do it. Normally they would make you make payments along the way, but let's just kind of go with what they're saying. So they're saying you walk into the furniture store today, time period 0, and you leave with some furniture. But you're not going to pay for it until 2 years down the road, and then you have to come up with a lump sum of $1,000. So they're saying, okay, let's pretend like you look, and the interest rate that you would have to pay on that kind of a personal loan would be 7.5%. So the question is, what is the value then of that furniture today? Time period 0. So you're not making any payments along the way in their scenario. So payment is 0. So 0 payment, 1.75 IY, 2N, 1,000 future value, compute present value. So they're is $865.33. The rest of it is the cost of financing it, an interest charge basically. So what these furniture companies do is either they have a division that will do the financing, or they have another company that they sell that paper to, and then the way that that financing arm or that other company they sold that to earns money is that the real value of the furniture is $865.33, so maybe that's what they pay the furniture store in exchange for collecting that $1,000 from you 2 years from now. Okay, like I said, normally that's not the scenario. Normally the scenario is they want you to make payments along the way because they think if you can't come up with $1,000 today, time period 0, what's the chance that you can come up with $1,000 in 2 years, plus by then the furniture's all worn. You used it. They don't want to repossess it at that point. So usually what they'll do is they'll set up a payment plan. Let me get a drink because my throat still isn't 100% after this cold. Interestingly enough, okay, I told you guys I'm a nerd. Interestingly enough, you can't go in and try to bargain with them on this. Okay, you can't go and say, okay, I don't want to sign up for that, just give me the furniture for $865.33. Okay, that they're making a deal because that's how they want to do that. One of my friends one time signed up for something like this, and she came to me and she knows I'm her nerdy friend, so she comes to me with stuff like this. And she was like, hey, I just signed up and it's $2,500 and they told me I could pay it over a year and I only have to make $50 payments. And I was like, wait a minute, best friend's name inserted here. That math doesn't work out. If you make $50 payments for 12 months, it's not paid off. So what was going to happen, we read through her contract, and what was going to happen was she had to make her payments on time every time, or there would be a huge late fee. And honestly, what was happening was, if she didn't have the $2,500 paid off by the end of the year, then interest started back at time period 0. But they were sending her sheets saying you only have to make this $50 payment. Well, you read the fine line, and that's the minimum payment they want you to make. So I made a little Excel spreadsheet for her and showed her what she really needed to pay off every month to make sure that that was completely paid off so it wouldn't trigger any interest. And I told her, send your payments in like 12 days early or something like that so it's never late, so you never get a late fee. So you need to kind of watch what you're signing up for when you sign up for these, 90 days same as cash or some of those other things that they're trying to get you to sign up for, because there might be some fine print that it's really not 90 days same as cash. It might not really be, 2 years and $1,000. It might have a lot of other stipulations to it. So watch out what you're doing as a consumer when you sign up for those kind of things. Okay, moving on then. Sorry about my voice. On page 131, don't get too concerned when you're reading through problems like what they're trying to present on page 130 and 131. What's happening here is they're saying, okay, let's pretend like you're standing here at time period 0, and this can happen a lot of times personally or with a company. And they're saying, all of your cash flows that you're planning for don't always happen at time period 0. You might be looking at buying a house in 5 years, or you might be looking at buying a car in 2 years. So you're forward planning. So they're saying, okay, we're doing some forward planning. And they're pretending like at the end of year 3, they're going to need $200. They're saying, well, maybe they just started their job today, so they don't have any money. So they're hoping at year 2 that they could come up with a lump sum that they could invest so that they would have that $200 at the end of year 3. So they're saying, okay, how much do I have to come up with then at year 2 so that I can have this $200 at the end of year 3? So like I said, don't let it throw you that you're doing the forward planning, because if you look at this problem, what we have is a simple present value to future value problem. And they're just saying, okay, I'm looking at one period. Year 2 I'm investing, might be standing here looking at it, but that's okay, break it down to what you're seeing on your timeline. So I always tell students, here, I'll give you the answer. The answer was, did they give it to me? Oh, the 188, 68. Invested at time period 2 grows to $200. At time period 3, if you earn 6% for that one period that you have it invested. So I tell students, don't be afraid to draw a timeline if you need to. Sometimes that helps you break it down and helps you understand what's really going on with those cash flows as you kind of start to read through those. The next thing they say then, and again, it's just talking about periods in the future, but you just break it down into your timeline. They're saying, okay, well, what happens if I don't use that 200 and I just leave it invested at that 6%? So you earn 6% from time period, basically 2 to 5, or 3 to 5. You can do it whichever way you want to. So the two ways you could have done that was you could have gone back to the 188.68 and had it at 6% for 3 periods, going from time period 2 to 5. Or you could have just taken this $200, made that be a present value, pretend like it stays invested for the 2 periods, and this is the way they're presenting it. They're pretending like that 200, and they're on the page 131. They're pretending like that 200 stays invested for 2 periods at 6%, no payments, to calculate out the future value, $224.72. So sometimes there's more than one way to do a calculation to get there. Like I said, the way they worded this, they were having you pretend like, okay, instead of pulling the $200 out of the account, you leave it in and let it grow for 2 more periods. So that's why they're presenting it like, make that 200 be a present value that grows for 2 periods at 6%. But if you would have seen it that it's also the same money you put in at year 2 and it grew at 6% for 3 periods, you get the same answer because it's just the compounding that's starting to happen. So what happens once we get to chapter 4 is the exams become problems. And I try to partial credit grade them. So what I'm going to do is I'll have you guys tell me the inputs that you're putting on your calculator, which is another reason why I only test you over 2 chapters at a time, because it's going to take you a little time to document that. You're just getting used to your calculator, and that way you can get some partial credit grading. Questions on this? The next thing that he starts talking about then, and I'm just trying to stay in his order, on page 132, he talks about the rule of 72. So the rule of 72, honestly, I don't use it very much because, and I'll talk about it here in a minute, but it leaves out some important things when you're looking at the rule of 72. But what the rule of 72 is saying, if you take the number 72 and you divide it by the number of years you're going to have your money invested, you'll know at what percentage rate you need to earn for your money to double. Or thinking of algebra, the number 72 divided by the interest rate you earn gives you the number of years it would take for your money to double. So the one that they give you, they say, okay, let's pretend like you can earn 6% interest. So 72 divided by 6% interest, so 72 divided by 6 is 12. So if you can earn 6% interest, the rule of 72 is saying it takes 12 years for your money to double. money doubling. I told you the reason I don't use it very much is because the rule of 72 is leaving out expenses that could incur along the way, which will take your money longer to double. For example, if you're not invested tax-free, you've got to pay taxes as you earn that money, as you earn that return. So that's going to take your money longer to double. Another thing that it doesn't take into account is investment or brokerage fees. Investment or brokerage fees. Some brokerages will charge you an upfront cost. As you invest the money, some will charge you a fee when you take the money out. Some will charge you a fee every year for managing your money. Some will charge you all three. Okay, if they're charging me fees, that's also going to take my money longer to double. So that's what I'm saying. I really don't use the rule of 72 very often because if somebody's paying taxes or paying brokerage fees, it's really going to take their money longer to double, or they're going to need a higher interest rate. Again, staying in line with the author, he's kind of jumping around. On page 133, he talks about computing interest rates. Honestly, when you're computing the IY, which is your interest rate or your rate of return, or you're computing your N, the only trick is to remember that you've got to show your calculator that money flows both directions. So let's do at least one together. So page 133, again sticking with his numbers. They're saying, okay, let's pretend like present value is $350. They're saying, let's pretend like it's invested for 3 periods, so 3N. So 350 present value, 3 for your N. Again, we're having a payment of 0. And he's saying future value of 475. Like I said, you got to be careful though, because one of these numbers has to be a negative. You can't have 350 positive and 475 positive and have a return, because that's money going the same way. So to make one of the numbers negative, let's pretend like we're making the future value negative. What you have to do is you have to hit the plus minus sign that's the same color as your numbers. So you hit the plus minus sign. And on mine, I know somebody had a version of the BA2 Plus one time that did it opposite. But on mine, I have to put in the 475 and then hit the plus minus sign. So try that first. So 475 plus minus, then hit future value. 475 plus minus. The plus minus sign is the same color as your numbers, and then hit future value. Then hit CPT IY. .716%. Or 10.71. That's all I'm going to worry about. Because sometimes these calculators will round a little different. If you get an error 5, ERR 5 or ERR 7, that's telling you that you don't have a return because you made both of these numbers positive or both of these numbers negative. So if you ever get an error 5 or error 7, just clear it, and then go change one of your numbers. Because remember, your calculator remembered all this. You don't have to start all over again. All you have to do is go hit 475 plus minus future value CPT IY again. You don't have to go re-input all 5 variables. I would get 475 at the end of 3 years, I'm earning 10.71% basically, or 10.72. I don't care where you round it. Was everybody able to get that? Like I said, he skips around because now he goes into solving for time. And so he gives you one where your money's doubling. So if you look at this, he's saying, okay, on page 135, let's pretend like we can earn 9%. So IY of 9. Let's pretend like we're investing 5,000 at time period 0, and he's making that the negative, but it doesn't really matter at this point which one you're making positive and which one you're making negative. And he's saying, let's pretend like our future value then is 10,000. And he's saying, how long does it take earning 9% for 5,000 to basically double, right? So you're going to CPT out the end. With your calculator, you get 8.04. He's showing you with the rule of 72, you get 8. So again, 72 isn't the perfect number, to be using. It's just an approximation of how long it's going to take your money to double. When here they're saying it would actually take 8.04 years, and that's saying that you have no taxes, no commissions, no brokerage fees, etc. You're getting all 9% of the return. Okay. Questions or comments? So chapter 4 is pretty basic. Again, we're just trying to start you out, get you guys used to your calculators. So the homework shouldn't be too hard. I'll go ahead and get it posted so as you're working with your calculators over the weekend, you can always understand what's going on. Questions or comments?
So you can change either the PD or the FD as a negative?
Yes, the question was, does it make a difference which is negative, the PD or the FB? And the answer is no, it doesn't matter which one's negative at this point. When it starts to make a difference which one's positive or negative, I'll let you know. Because what we're saying is, if you think about it, one person's rate of return is another person's interest expense. So it doesn't really matter if you're putting the money in to get the money out, or if somebody's giving you money and you're giving them